102 racers have lined up to swim 22 miles in William Wrigley Jr.'s highly anticipated Ocean Marathon. Stripping naked and covering themselves with lard, men, women, and even the legless Mad Dog Russian have entered the chilly winter water to take a shot at crossing the channel first.
It generated a ton of publicity. Had a lot of people saying they're swimming to where, which of course was the point.
Catalina is quite an interesting destination, considering how close we are to Southern California. William Wrigley Jr. is a gentleman who purchased this island in 1919, and he's the one that really got the island going.
William Wrigley, to me, was a genius. He was Disney before Disney was. He invented the all-inclusive vacation. He owned the island, he owned the shipping line, he owned the hotels, he owned the restaurants. It just made Avalon an amazing place.
People really wanted to come to Catalina and enjoy themselves. It was magic.
Of the 8 Channel Islands off the coast of Southern California, only Santa Catalina is developed for recreation. And this is restricted to a single square mile, the city of Avalon.
Welcome to Catalina. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. If you have any questions or needs.
Chuck was born here and is quite proud of it. And he's become the official greeter and the town historian.
The town was called Tim's Landing when George Chateau purchased the island. And then they changed the name and started calling it Chateau Town. Luckily for all of us, his sister-in-law had been reading a poem by Lord Tennyson. And Etta went to her brother-in-law and said, "George, how do you like the name Avalon?" He said, "It certainly sounds a lot better than Chateau Town." George Chateau had the vision, but he didn't have the money. So the 3 Banning brothers took over the island in 1891. They were the ones that were bringing all the passengers over here in their boats. So they felt, why don't we just own it? Now, the Banning brothers had a lot of good ideas for this island. The only trouble is they had stipulations that the people of Avalon didn't like. They didn't want any alcohol to be served in this town. I mean, let's face it, part of fishing is drinking. To come over to the island and not being able to drink is almost a sacrilege to fishermen. Now, fishing became a big industry over here. In fact, we still have the Tuna Club.
We were founded in 1898 by Charles Frederick Holder.
He wanted to give the fish a sporting chance. That's where the term sports fishing came.
We're the birthplace of big game angling and big game blue water conservation.
The old story is there was a gentleman who wanted to collect the insurance on his hotel. He also wanted to collect the insurance on his mother-in-law. And so he locked the mother-in-law up in the attic, set the hotel on fire, and left the town. Well, they luckily got the mother-in-law out in time, and within a matter of a couple of hours, the whole west end of Avalon had been destroyed. Well, the Bannings went bankrupt, and so they were obviously looking for another speculator. Well, they just happened to find out that William Wrigley Jr. had just purchased a home in Pasadena.
He came from Philadelphia with no money. I think he had $16. He moved to Chicago and was selling soap. He was a traveling salesman, and from there eventually started the gum company.
They sent Charles Sumner to talk to Mr. Wrigley and said, "How would you like to buy an island?"
He seemed to feed off of his own energy. The more gum he sold, the more gum he wanted to sell, and the more things he wanted to do, and he kept coming up with ever more creative ideas to promote it.
So in 1919, sight unseen, Mr. Wrigley purchased the entire stock of the Santa Catalina Island Company and ended up with this island.
He and great-grandmother, Ada, came out to Catalina and were just captivated by how beautiful it was. And in fact, there's a quote, "The sun was just coming up and I had never seen a more beautiful spot. Right then and there, I determined that the island should never pass out of my hands." I'm the 4th generation to be involved with Catalina and to pour my heart and soul into it, and it's so magical. The air feels different. I don't know why. It just takes over you.
Mr. Wrigley, although he had all of this money, was really a very common man. It was stated many times to have said that he wanted everyone to be able to come over and enjoy this island.
He did so much to build up Avalon.
Instead of running tent hotels, he wanted to build beautiful hotels. He decided he should buy glass-bottom boats to see the undersea gardens. He put in electricity and water. Water was a big problem on Catalina, and it's kind of funny to think about that now because water is still a big problem on Catalina.
Mr. Wrigley realized that there are only 3 loves that he really had in his life. It was his family, number 1, it was the island, number 2, and it was the Cubs, number 3.
He thought a good way to promote Catalina was to bring a different kind of star, so he moved spring training for the Cubs to Catalina.
It's kind of hard to imagine now, but this was Wrigley Field once. This is where the Cubs practiced on Catalina from 1921 to 1951. If you know where to look, you can still see some of the remnants, maybe still hear some of the sounds and feel some of the magic from those days.
Just watching the Cubs and just the excitement they brought to Avalon, you wanted to be there. You wanted to be there with those guys.
They met us at the boat, the gals put the leis around our shoulders, and we came down, we bowled, we played horseshoes, we talked, and it was just like we were part of this family.
There's another thing so they thought would attract people to Catalina was to make movies here, and so he did promote this as a place for producers.
Anything you ever see that's a South Sea movie that's black and white was undoubtedly filmed here.
The bison were brought over to film Zane Grey's novel, Vanishing American. Fortunately, the bison didn't really stick to the script, and they kind of scattered in all different directions. The bison ended up repopulating and ultimately got to about 700. So they tried to keep the number around 200 to 250.
There were all kinds of stars that were here.
When I was a kid, John Wayne was here a lot.
By the way, Marilyn Monroe used to party with some of our younger kids here in Avalon.
When she was 16, Norma Jane Doherty got married, and she married a merchant marine. He was stationed out here during the war, and so she was a resident in Avalon in Catalina before she was Marilyn Monroe.
He blasted the rock away so that he could build his bigger dance pavilion, which he called Casino, meaning meeting place in Italian, which has been a source of great confusion ever since because people think you can gamble there.
We're in the Avalon Theater area of the casino building, and it was one of the first theaters built for sound. One time my mother told me she was here. When the lights went up, she was sitting next to James Cagney and didn't know it while they were watching the movie.
The largest number that they ever had for a big band was during Memorial Weekend of 1934. We had 10,000 people standing and dancing here in this beautiful ballroom.
I'm told that one of the disagreements he had along the way was with his lieutenants in the Santa Catalina Island Company, where they wanted to charge for people to come and dance, and he insisted that it be free, that it was something that should be enjoyed by everybody regardless of their station in life.
When William Wrigley died in 1932, the whole aura of Santa Catalina Island dimmed. He was so much a part of the spirit of Catalina in its glory days of the 1920s and 30s. There was bound to be a hangover, and Catalina began to suffer.
America goes to war.
The war was declared on December 7th, 1941. On December 8th, the government, right away, they had plans for this island. The only way you could go back and forth was to show a card. You had to either be with the military or you had to be a resident on the island. No visitors were allowed here during World War II. So the economy really plummeted. A lot of the families left the island. The Chicago Cubs, who had been coming here from 1921, had to stop during the war because a lot of their players had been drafted.
The interesting thing is when the Cubs left after 1951, a lot of the locals thought they were coming back because just a few years earlier during the war they had left, and they thought, well, this will be a short-term thing, and over time they realized they weren't coming back anymore.
I literally grew up in the city of Chicago, so for me, Catalina was paradise. I love horses, and my father loved horses, so my fondest memories are riding with him in the mountains. I love it when people say, I've been to Catalina, I've been to Avalon, and I bought a t-shirt. There's so much more to Catalina than just Avalon.
It's all hidden in the valleys and on the mountains, and there's so many plants and animals to see that are, really exciting and really different that you don't find anywhere.
There's no question that Farnsworth Bank is probably one of the greatest dives you can do in the world.
In 1975, my grandfather, Philip K. Wrigley, and his sister, Dorothy Offield, deeded 88% of Catalina's land to the Conservancy, so that you have the wild lands of Catalina being available for people who are just 22 miles away in an urban setting, and they can come here and be in a whole different universe.
In order to show everyone the beauty of the island, you have to be able to do that without damaging the island at the same time. So it's definitely an ongoing challenge.
With these wonderful legacies of 3 generations of Wrigley, the responsibility has been placed on my wife and to some extent my shoulders to help move the island forward even more.
Businesses on Catalina Island don't have enough water.
You're still asking guests not to take a bath.
No baths, please. I don't know what we're gonna do, 50%. Seems like a lot. Let's see, 3 people in the shower at once, drink soda and beer instead of water, I don't know.
We used to have 1,000 people here year-round. Now we got 4,000 people.
People are starting to bring water over from the mainland, but then you get problems with the people on the mainland being mad that we're stealing their water there. So water is always going to be an issue.
We're going to have to start making a few major modifications on how we perceive even life over here on the island. Catalina now has to go up to bat, and we have to have a little more ammo than just simply to say that we're a place that's stood still for the last 50 years.
We've been working on things like our Descanso Beach Club, the zip line.
The ultimate Catalina thrill ride was coming down these hills in a stagecoach, and now we have a zip line. Same sort of idea, probably a little safer.
That's one thing my kids have learned from being zipline guides. They're trained naturalists, trained by the Conservancy, and it's an eco tour.
But getting a new perspective really changed my view of Catalina and made me realize how important it is to me and how I could never let Catalina not be a part of my life.
Well, our vision really is to maintain the history, honor it, but to bring it into modern times. I think each generation has the past and what's gone on, and then they add something of their own. We seem to be the building generation, I think because everything that my great-grandfather built is now very old and it needs maintenance all at the same time, so that's a big challenge.
People don't want development, they want it as it always has been. There are certain things we should preserve, other things that it's good to upgrade them.
Places like the casino are incredible jewels.
This is all the original wood that you would have danced on May 29th, 1929.
And we can't just let them fall into the ocean.
I always consider this to be a living thing. I refer to it as a her. This is a woman, an older woman, but a very proud and a beautiful woman. When the old lady's happy, everybody's happy.
Something that I realized just the other day is that at the time that William Wrigley Jr. became involved with Catalina, he was 58 years old. Then he was still going like crazy. I just feel the same kind of energy, and I know Jeff does too, and hopefully we live as long as he did and are able to accomplish more than we have to date.
After 15.5 hours of swimming, the waterlogged 17-year-old George Young won the $25,000 grand prize. He said he did it for his sick mother.